Hello. Thank you for coming to the webinar today. I'm going to give everyone another minute to trickle in. So if you've come in right on time, feel free to get yourself comfortable, do what you need to do. All right, we'll get started. Welcome to Elevate Your Coaching, Mastering Scorecards and Coaching. I'm Kaylin Kless. I'm a customer success manager at SalesScreen, and we're going to be taking a little bit of a closer look at scorecards and coaching. A lot of times people have these features and don't feel quite sure either how to use them technically or how to make the most out of them. So we're going to give a few tips on both. There's going to be a presentation first, and then we're going to go into a demo. We're actually just going to quickly create a scorecard and a coaching program in front of you. So if anything isn't super clear from the slides or the description, don't worry about it. We're going to put it all together afterwards. So this series, if you haven't joined us before, is for the team leaders who know the basics of how to use SalesScreen as an app and how it works and are ready to focus on advanced settings and how we use SalesScreen to motivate. But that being said, feel free to ask any questions you want in the chat, including beginner questions, and we'll answer there directly or discuss further at the end, depending. So today we're going to be discussing scorecard setup and the advanced settings that you might not have gotten a chance to set up, even if you have a scorecard in place, coaching setup and best practices there. And at the end, we're going to have a quick intro to our new multi-round competitions, which are live today if you have Pro. So that's very exciting. If you haven't had a chance to check those out, we're going to go over it with you. So starting with scorecards, because that's where we base all the data that we tend to pull in for discussing coaching and other things. Just a quick intro to the value of these scorecards. Basically, this is a way of displaying your team or individual performance on key KPIs and provide weighted prioritization and clarity. So you have your dashboards where you can see leaderboards of how people are doing on individual metrics, but scorecards bring that all together so you can pick the ones that are most valuable, see them all together and averaged out based on which of those metrics are most important. And this helps teams and managers see their success and improvement, and it drives alignment and accountability. So a few different ways you could set up your scorecards, and depending on what your priorities are. We want to share a few use cases here. So you could do two different scorecards in SalesScreen at the same time. And one way of using those is to create one for activities and one for outcomes so that you can see a difference between, things like making calls, setting meetings, and outcomes where you're just seeing the raw numbers, their sales data. And this separates the input behaviors from the output results, and you can compare those two scores for a certain player and maybe use that for a little bit of insight, both on your end and to give advice to your team member. Another use case would be to make the sales funnel more visible. So you could have, in a row on your scorecard, calls, meetings, a quote sent, and then how many offers are accepted. So that gives people a little bit more of a clear understanding of how they're expected to flow through their funnel and maybe where some stuck points might be. And then another would be to have just everything, comprehensive KPIs. In a way, like I said, it's a more holistic way of viewing your data for each player rather than putting things into a dashboard, which is super useful. But again, it's looking at each individual metric separately, whereas the scorecards are pulling it all together. So when you set up a scorecard, and don't worry if this feels a little bit oblique here, we're going to do this live together in a demo environment. But basically, all you have to do when you're setting up a scorecard is choose whether you're doing a company scorecard. So if everybody has the same metrics, that is a really easy way to just set one standardized scorecard that works for everyone. Or you can do team by team scorecards. So maybe you have, your inbound team has very different goals from your outbound team. That would be a time when you want to create different scorecards for each team. You can choose the time period and privacy level for your objective scores. And you want to then select the metrics that you will contribute to the score, set the benchmarks on those metrics, and then set the relative weight of each of those metrics worth. So maybe your sales revenue is worth more than how many quotes are sent, because at the end of the day, you want to see the result. And then if you want to do a secondary objective score, you can make a second scorecard and repeat those steps. So these are the icons that you'll see on each line when you're creating these scorecard metrics. And I just want to dive a little bit more into what these mean, and we'll do some examples live as well. But we have auto benchmarks, which is for if you're not sure exactly where to start people when you're creating a target on your scorecards, this will give you an automatic benchmark based on previous data from your account. So it's a good way to get started. And then potentially you might have, even within the same team, players that have very different goals, very different expectations. So you can use custom benchmarks to jump into each individual player on a team and create a separate benchmark for them. So you could do that for every single member of the team, or you could just do it for a few. Maybe you have some people who are newer, and for a little while you want to give them a lower benchmark. That's a potential use case for that. Then we have the ability to set a minimum and maximum value. So maybe you say you don't count any calls up until the first 20. That would be an example of using a minimum value. And then maybe you say like, okay, after 100 calls, this just isn't doing anything new. You want to focus on quality and not just quantity. So anything over 100 calls won't count and won't be factored in. So you can't go over 100% of that metric. So, and we talked a little bit about this before, but I wanted to really call out when to use dashboards, when to use scorecards, because it seems like these are doing similar things to a certain extent. Dashboards are really good for visualizing the stats for your company or your team or the individual on a per metric basis. There's also just more you can see visually. So for example, you could break down your sales either as a per user leaderboard, like a top 10 list. You could do it as a timeline so you can see trends over time, or you could maybe break it down into a pie chart of products or other sale categories that you might have. With the scorecards, you're only going to be seeing those bars and whether they're hitting the targets or not, but you're pulling in multiple metrics and you're going to be able to weight them accordingly. Whereas if you're looking at a dashboard, maybe you can use your intuition to see which ones are more important, but with scorecards, it's really clear what's being given the highest priority. So then once you have your scorecard set out, that's an objective measure that you can pull into your coaching sessions. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now. So the benefits of a coaching routine is absolutely worth your time. Even if you feel like there's no free time to do coaching, that might be a sign that you most need to set aside the time for it. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed, you feel like you don't know when you're going to have times with your reps, imagine how they're feeling. If they feel like it's very difficult to get a hold of someone, they might be feeling a little bit unsupported. So if you have a time set aside, maybe every week, but maybe every other week, maybe every month, then that's a time that your reps know that they'll be able to come to you and have your undivided attention as they're working through their goals. So this enables consistent habit building because they know they're going to have that check-in. And it's also automated, so you can already have that data in front of you without having to do a lot of math or pulling spreadsheets before a coaching session. So these are customizable based on your priorities, and then you can track them. You have a record of all of your coaching sessions in SalesScreen. So that is a very good reason to formalize your coaching process, even if you're already doing a lot of work with your team and giving a lot of advice. Trying to consolidate it into one place can be really helpful. So in a similar way, we have multiple use cases for these for coaching, and we're going to move ahead to look at how to set up this coaching program. So we have a lot of suggested use cases. You could do a regular check-in, you could review pipeline, Sometimes you might want to have a separate coaching program just for newbies who are coming in and doing some one-on-one. So the steps for basically going through and creating your new coaching program, the things that you're going to want to talk about are choosing a template. So we have some suggested ones and we'll go through them. You'll get to set a subject, a description, a time frame, and a privacy level. And then you're going to select which users can coach the new program. At this stage, you're not choosing who's going to be taking these coaching sessions. You're just going to be choosing who can coach it. And then you'll set the preliminary questions. Those need to be answered by either the coach, the participant, or both prior to each session, so everyone's prepped. And then you'll select the data that you can review in each session. Usually that's your scorecard. That tends to be the thing that makes the most sense, but you can also pull in specific metrics as well. And then you'll get a chance to preview and create your coaching program. So when you're scheduling a session, once you've created a program, that is basically a way of grouping together certain questions, a certain plan for a coaching session. Individual sessions then get attached to these programs so that you can schedule them with individual users. When you do that, you're going to select the program you're scheduling the sessions for, select the participants who need a session, and then you can use the auto populator to schedule, or you can go through and set individual times. So we'll talk all about that. If it's suggesting times that don't work for you, you can always change that. Then you'll send the invitations. This will go out to their email and SalesScreen, and it'll send them a calendar invite. And you can also use jump into a quick session right there in the platform if you need to log a meeting on the spot. So to prep your coaching session, there's a few things you might want to cover so that you come in really prepared and ready to have a fruitful session. You want to have your hard stats, which again, if you're pulling in scorecards, you'll have these in front of you, but it's always a good idea to look through it first before you go into the session so that you have a thorough understanding of where your coachee currently falls in terms of tangible outcomes and activities. And then keeping those objective measures a focus within each session is really good because this leaves less room for confusion. It's not vibes based. You can point to a specific number and then both of you are on the same page. It leaves, it provides a lot more clarity about what's being asked and whether expectations have been met. But that means that we also don't want to neglect those social things, those soft skills. So check in on how your employee is feeling personally, the interactions they're having with their coworkers, whether they feel supported and are enjoying their work. These can all be incorporated into these topics and discussions of performance. The other thing that you want to do really quickly, and I'll show you where this would happen, check for completion of those preliminary questions. That shows whether these sessions are helpful to the other person. You get to make sure you have an idea of what they want to talk about. And if you notice that some answers are regularly left incomplete, either by one person or by multiple members of your team, that's an opportunity to check in and see if they maybe are unclear questions or maybe they're not finding them as helpful to their process. And you can always tweak those coaching programs. Another thing you can check when you're preparing for a coaching session is the player profile. This is a relatively recent feature. I mean, we've had a smaller profile in the past, but now we have one with a lot of rich data for you to check out. And you can leverage that in your coaching sessions as well. So you can go into the game stats tab or the ongoing tabs and see if there's any recent achievements or endorsements, some sort of activity from that player that you might want to call out as part of that coaching session. If they've been getting a lot of good endorsements, you might want to let them know, hey, like your team is really appreciating the work you're doing. If they've been giving a lot of good endorsements, that's something to call out too. Let them know that we're glad to see that they're supporting their team members and that they're being appreciative and calling those things out. And then again, to look at the hard stats, you can see the key metrics tab and their scorecard. And that allows you to quickly assess where your player is ranking against their teammates. And the coaching tab is also right there. So you can take a quick review of their recent sessions. And these all might have factors that you might want to consider bringing up. Oh, I see you're first out of 5 users on your team. Like, congratulations. Or if they're falling behind, you might want to check in and see if anything is giving them a challenge that they need some support with. So the player profile and the user dashboard, and a lot of people have dashboards that are geared into just one user's stats. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between those things and how you would use them. So the player profile is tracking intra-team comparisons, just the user and their team, that have been designated key metrics in your platform. So in some cases, this might eliminate the need for an individual user dashboard setup, especially for a smaller company. However, the user dashboard allows for tracking of additional metrics and greater variance of how that data is presented. Again, greater visuals, the leaderboards, trend lines, recent reports. And the player profiles are also intended for both individual and managerial use because you can check in on those rankings, whereas an individual user dashboard doesn't lend itself quite as well to managerial oversight because it's just going to show the data for whoever is looking in, including you as a manager. It's not impossible to look at the user data board as a manager. You can go in and check view as user, but it doesn't lend itself quite as well to that sort of comparison. So some things to keep in mind once you're actually in your coaching session, you've done your prep, is that use those questions and the answers as a guide for true conversation. If you're just going down the line, checking boxes, it doesn't create the opportunity for as honest dialogue and to feel supported as if you're just sort of using them as a touch point to get a little bit deeper with your coachee. So ask thoughtful follow-up questions, especially if those answers that they give aren't super detailed. There's a chance to dig in a little bit deeper and maybe ask some questions that aren't on the list, but would be helpful and that come to light as you're going through your session. Keep notes for reference and transparency. There is a section for you to do that when you go into your session. And I recommend keeping all of the notes shared. You have an ability to do shared notes that both you and the coachee can see, and also notes that are just private to you, which can be really useful. But for the most part, I think it makes most sense to keep all notes shared unless you have a pressing reason not to do so. That creates greater transparency and gives your coachee the ability to go back and see those notes. I apologize if anyone is hearing there's sirens in my neighborhood. I'm so sorry. So as you get to the end of your coaching session, you might want to discuss some potential solutions right there. And maybe you can't come up with a solution to every challenge your player is having right there live, but it's a good time to get their feedback and then create those concrete plans for implementation, hopefully based on some of the feedback they've provided you as well. And we give you a lot of tools in SalesScreen to create identifiable tasks that people can do to follow up on that feedback. So we have tasks that you can assign within coaching. Coming out in May are missions, where you can put together some individual tasks, some goals for various metrics, and even some goals to win certain achievement badges. So that's a good way to create a comprehensive program to help somebody out, whether it's catching up or getting ahead. And maybe endorsements are a good way to follow up on this. If you have something come to light in the course of your session where you realize that, wow, this employee has been taking on some extra project you weren't even aware of, that might be something you want to call out as an endorsement after the fact. And battles can also be a way of following up on things that you find in your session. Maybe you have two different players who are very aligned in what they need to focus on. They both need to focus on booking more meetings, and then you can pair them together for a battle so that they can kind of encourage each other. We have a few suggestions to offer to tailor these a little bit more for each personality type. If you've been with SalesScreen a while, you might have heard of player types, which are basically just different ways that people respond to competitive and game-like environments. So you have, a group of people that you might recognize, some of these on your team. So you have achievers who are constantly trying to set a higher bar for themselves and really like to see those achievement badges and just see that their work is being recognized and cataloged in some way. So those are people where you really want to set a new bar every time you go into a coaching session, and give them something to reach for that is just a little bit outside of their grasp. And in general, that's always a good way to think about goal setting. Is most satisfying to reach a goal that's just a little bit too hard, but not completely impossible. And then you have some people who just really like to keep finding new ways of doing their job, new discoveries. And these are people where you might want to have a question of the week, something that you switch up the conversation with every now and then to give them something new to think about and keep them engaged. A lot of your team are probably socialites who are mostly focused on the way they're supporting their team, the way their team is seeing what they're doing. So for these people, data is key, but these players might appreciate public shout outs from you as a manager, as an endorsement, or maybe if you know that they've helped somebody out in the past, see if you can find that person and suggest that they give an endorsement to a socialite. And that really lights people up to see that it's being recognized publicly. And then you have your killers, super competitive, really want to be at the top of every leaderboard, the first place in every competition. And this is where it really helps to keep score and emphasize their stats, show where they've overperformed, tell them how they rank against their peers, pulling in those comparisons in your player profile where it shows where they rank in their team can be really helpful for people who have that competitive killer mindset. So again, to follow up on your coaching session, we have a few different things that we just want to nail down into your head. There's the tasks. If you want to keep track of specific action items that arise from your sessions, you can assign these to the participant or to yourself as the coach if there's something you need to follow up on in order to support your player. In May 6th, you'll have missions, so you can create a time-bound cluster of goals for your coachee. If there's something that they need to pull up by a certain time, a mission is a great way to emphasize that for them. You have the endorsements, which we've talked a lot about. So you can either suggest an endorsement that they can give to somebody else, suggest somebody else give an endorsement to them, or give one yourself, which is always a good way to encourage endorsements generally when people see that managers give them and managers react to them. So if you see endorsement activity between your team, always be sure to comment, be sure to like, encourage that behavior. And then finally, battles. So if you have two players that are very well aligned in what they need to work on, that is a hidden follow-up task that a lot of people don't realize could be used to their advantage. So be sure to consider it next time. So I'm going to briefly stop sharing here. We have a new competition multi-round, which I'm going to share in a moment, but let's put this all together and create a new scorecard and a new coaching session for our team. So my apologies, I am having trouble pulling up my Zoom. Okay, here we go. So sorry. So right now we have one team scorecard for our B2B inbound team. And I'm just going to jump in there so you can see a little bit of how this is laid out if you haven't seen it before. So this one we're doing, the example that we're using is more of the pipeline example where we want to see their calls and how those flow into opportunities, then the number of quotes sent and their sales revenue. And these little black lines here are showing where ideally you want to be at this point in the week. In this case, it's a weekly scorecard in order to get to your goals on time. If I wanted to jump in individually to each of these players, I could then see, okay, so, Damon's behind on calls, but maybe that's okay. He's got a lot of opportunities in the pipeline. He's already beyond where he needs to be for quotes sent, and he's doing really well on revenue. So that might be something that in ordinary days I'd be concerned about, but in his case is totally fine. So you can also use your own judgment on these things. But maybe we also want to make a scorecard for our B2B outbound team. So right now we only have one team scorecard. How we're going to add another one. So we go to edit scorecards. You see right now the specifications that we have for our B2B inbound team. I'm going to pick from the dropdown my B2B outbound team. So I haven't created a scorecard yet here. I'll click create. So what I can do is copy from an existing team, but I want to show you how to add each individual new metric. So we're going to click here. I'm going to pick my calls metric. So you'll see key metrics are highlighted here, but I can open this up to all of my available metrics right here. And I'm going to pick total answered calls, save it, and we'll say the benchmark is 75 for outbound, and I'm going to hold the weights for a little bit later. Then I'll say that we need to track opportunity value and how many quotes are sent. That's in our key metrics, as well as our sales revenue. I'll go ahead and I'll set these benchmarks. I'll say 300K for opportunities, 6 quotes sent, and maybe 50K for sales revenue. Now I have to set these as a weighted percentage. So we have got 4 of these. I'm going to say that quotes and sales are worth more. So I'll say 30% and 30%, and that leaves 40% and it needs to be accounted for. I'm going to say 20% each for calls and opportunities. And I'll save that. But if I wanted to go a little bit deep, I'm not going to set the auto, but if I just clicked this button right here, I'd get a new benchmark based on the data from the previous period. I'm not going to do that since this is a dummy account, and that might give me a weird number for this. But if I have different users on this team and maybe I want to set slightly different goals for them, let's say in sales revenue, I'm not expecting quite as much from Ryder. Ryder's a little bit new. I could go through and make this a 400K. Okay. And I could do that for everyone on the team if I wanted to. And we were talking before about answered calls. Maybe we want to say that you only get any points at all for doing 20 calls. That's the minimum. And then the maximum, if you say, if you're going over 125, how high quality are these calls really? So I'm going to set a minimum value and a maximum value on my calls. I'm going to save this. And then if you go back, I now have that in my list of scorecards right here. And we can see my team. I'm going to give a quick resync. But if not, if this is not going to pull us in time, we have an idea of what that looks like from our B2B inbound team. So I'm going to jump in because we are getting towards the end. I want to jump in and show how to do some coaching. So you can see some current sessions that I've had or previous sessions. And I just want to show you the programs I have set up. So this one is an SDR weekly check-in call. This is where I see the details for this. I have 3 coaches available for this. I have several different participants who have been assigned to these, and our preliminary questions are: what strategy or theme would you use this week to generate interest? What have you been doing that's working? What have you been doing that's not working? Our data review is pulling in scorecards, and then I can see upcoming and past sessions. But let's say I want to create a check-in program for my newer teammates. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to pick onboarding follow-up for new employees. You can also start totally from scratch, but today we're not going to do that. I have my subject already set. I could do a description if I wanted. This is going to start today as a time frame for how long this coaching program is going to go. I'm going to say this goes on for the next few months and ends in July. I'm going to keep my coaching sessions private. This is almost always the most sensible option to pick, which is why it's checked by default. And I'll say that I'm the only one who can coach this one. So we have a few different preliminary questions suggested. So maybe we'll say, summarize the challenges you've had since our last session. Is there anything that you want to talk strategy on? And we can add a new question of your own. Is there anything you need to learn? And maybe for this one, I say we both answer this because maybe I, as a manager, know some skills that the participant's going to need to learn that might not be aware of. So I can answer this question as well. data to review, I'm just going to pull in the scorecard every time. But again, you could also pull in their targets. You can pull in from an external source, and you can pull in specific metrics or activity flows as well. And then we have a preview of our details for this program. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. Now, that hasn't created any upcoming sessions. That's just created a general program I can follow. In order to assign this to anyone, I'm going to, oh, I'm sorry, I am in my managerial account. Be right back with this. And here we go. So now I can come in from my own user account, go through and schedule sessions. So I'm going to do my onboarding follow-up. I'm going to choose my, let's say, 3 new users. I'm going to say that this starts tomorrow at noon is when I'm going to start my coaching sessions. They're going to be 30 minutes long. I can set a time between to give myself a little bit of prep. So I'm going to say 10 minutes in between to do any items for me. As then this has created a little schedule for me where I start at 12, the next one is 12:40, and the next one is at 1:20. So let's say for this one, we're going to reschedule. I'm going to do that the next day, again, starting at noon. So you're not stuck with any of these dates that have been auto-populated. And then I'm going to preview all of these dates, make sure that they're what I want, and then I'll I'll click send calendar invitation and create. And now I have these upcoming sessions that are on my schedule that I can go in. I can check my preliminary questions and take notes on this session. So hopefully you're able to go through, create a few different programs that make sense for you. If one works for everyone, that's fine, but it's nice to have a little bit of tailoring. Maybe you could tailor by team or by experience level. And you can always, if you're on the spot talking with somebody and realize that this is becoming a coaching session, let's go ahead and do this. Or if you maybe didn't have a chance to schedule, but you realize you're both open right now, you can click jump into a quick session for any given user. And I can choose which program this is a part of, or just have it be a free form session where I can take notes as well. And I'll start that session. And so for this one, there's not going to be preliminary questions because I didn't pick a program, but it's a place where I can take notes. I can upload attachments. And if something comes up in this meeting where I say, okay, like update your pitch deck, I can assign that a due date and say that's due next week and give it to my participant, Damon Kelly. And then that'll be available on Damon's profile to keep him on task. So because we have, we're running, actually, we're not running that much overtime, but I do want to get to our new competition type, multi-round. So this is an exciting competition because it is in several stages. If you're familiar with our bracket competition, you might be thinking of that, but there are some important differences here. So with multi-round, you're able to give people multiple chances to keep coming back. It is not a completely competitive situation in which everyone needs to be eliminated at any round. As long as everyone's hitting the goals, you have the ability for everyone to make it to the final round. And we've also introduced the concept of lifelines here, which is a way for a player to come back if they haven't hit a goal for a particular target. And you can decide how many lifelines people get, but it's a good way to make sure that somebody who's a really good seller isn't knocked out right in the beginning because they had a bad day, or maybe they had a part of the competition where they were away and can't compete quite as much. They can use that lifeline to pull themselves in. So I'm going to quickly create one right here. I'm going to say this is a per user competition and that it starts, we'll say it starts at the beginning of this week. And it's going to go through the week for all of these. So let's do a pipeline competition. So we're going to take that, we're going to use this multi-round to focus on the steps in our pipeline. We're going to start with total calls. And we're going to say that the goal is to get at least 10 calls each for each player. And if they, as long as they get 10 calls, they can advance to round one. That's their qualify requirement. You could also set so that it's the top 10. But for right now, I want everyone to be able to make it through to the next one. So I'm going to say it's goal-based. Then for our next round, it's going to pick up exactly where the last one ended. And I'll say it goes for another week. And that this one is going to be based on our opportunities, our number of opportunities, and I'll keep 10 opportunities as the goal. Then for our final round, we're going to do quote sent. I'm going to say that lasts one more week. And I'll save that. And so because we have 3 stages, we have the option for 1 lifeline. With more stages, that will increase. So if you had an extra stage, you'd have the opportunity to do 2 lifelines. Do custom. Actually, I'm not going to worry about these too much. But and then our advanced options are the same as always. You can show just the top 10 or 3, 7, anything you want in their in the settings. I'm going to just keep it at everyone. And we'll call it Sellapalooza and save and publish. So hopefully this is a really exciting new way to keep your team very engaged and maybe encourage some people who tend to knock out early in certain competitions because they have a way to jump back in and have a little bit more time to get their feet wet. So these are already live if you have Pro, so go check it out. If you have Pro, go to competitions and play with a multi-round and let us know what you think. Thank you so much for joining us. I won't keep you any longer because we're already running over, but we hope you enjoy multi-round, and I hope that you have some more tools for coaching your players and keeping them motivated this year. Thank you, everybody.